Let's talk about this new framework that was released by President Jonathan Goodluck on Wednesday. Now, there are a lot of concerns about the feasibility of this framework. Of course, some of the projections for the oil sector, analysts say, may not be so reasonable. Let me just give you a picture. The oil production is forecasted to be 2.53 million barrels per day in 2013, 2.61 in 2014, and 2.65 in 2015. I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Joel?
I think it's fairly ambitious, actually. Obviously, Nigeria being Africa's largest producer, it has a fairly good record of climbing production. However, I think that the OPEC quota that was effectively erased last year, I think that provides lots of scope for people to be able to raise their output. But I think that Nigeria still has the occasional problems with output. Of course, we've seen production fall away at Bonny, at Brass, various places like this where there's been force majeure because of production issues and indeed sabotage. So I'd say 2.5 million is fairly ambitious, but I think that the price that was set of I think you said $75 or thereabouts that's kind of in line actually with a lot of other companies, excuse me, a lot of other companies and countries around the world, because of course the oil price fluctuations have been very obvious. We've seen crude oil prices lose around 10% in the last few days. So there is a lot of volatility out there. But what I suppose is very interesting is how much of that money could go into some kind of reserve account for oil prices. I suppose maybe that's part of that is the motivation as well.
That's right. And on that topic, Joel, I don't know, I'm sure you've heard that the Governors Forum is actually taking the federal government back to court because they're removing funds out of the excess crude account and, of course, the whole sovereign wealth fund debacle. What's your take, on this whole subsidy payment debacle and, of course, what's happening with the Governors Forum and the excess crude account right now?
Well, the excess crude account, it was interesting just hearing about Côte d'Ivoire and the cocoa account. It's a fairly similar structure, I would have thought. And I think that it would be, again, among OPEC members, it's quite rare that such countries don't have a sovereign wealth fund. It would make sense that there is one, and I can understand. I think it's fairly obvious why some of the state governors are perhaps against such a move. How this plays out, of course, I can't predict, but the fact that they are fighting it so vehemently gives a strong indication of how important it is to them. However, I would say that to ensure that the people of Nigeria are well supplied for, and to make sure that the ability of the country to reinvest in the oil and gas infrastructure of Nigeria, such a fund would probably be a very good idea.
The sovereign wealth fund there. But let's turn our attention over to other regions here, other countries in this region, Joel. Ghana, we're hearing any oil discovered, about 5,000 high-quality barrels of oil there. What is your outlook, for the oil sector in Ghana? It was discovered by Italian company Eni Oil. What's your take on what's going on over there?
Yes, Ghana, of course, is a growth area. They're still not quite producing enough to cover the imports of the refined product. But I think that will change in time. I think that Tullow obviously have made a big success of Jubilee, and production there seems stable and growing. I think there was a bit of a hiccup recently, but generally things seem to be going there pretty well. And Tullow actually has a very good record, and it's interesting to see the Italians following suit. Obviously, 5,000 barrels per day is not very much, but in time, if you find a good seam of oil, then things could, of course, improve, and that will mean very good things for the economy. So Ghana is such a growth area. Indeed, Platts is going to Ghana for a forum next week, in fact, to talk about the oil and gas sector, and it's proved a very popular thing. So clearly, Ghana is firmly on the oil map and set to grow.
And other countries like Cameroon, I'm sure, are also firmly on the oil map.